All right, what's up, everybody? Had no time to play guitar the whole week. I only had time to noodle, and you all know how I like noodling. So, what's up, everybody? Do we have anyone? Has anyone joined the live? Because the first live went really, really well. I didn't expect to have as many people. Adam! Hey, Adam, can you hear me? Well, you'll be my help here. Did you hear the guitar? Can you hear me speaking well? Do I need to turn up something? Because this time I think stuff is a little bit better than it was last time. All right, great. So everybody can hear me. So, Adam, how's the weather in Prague? What's up? So, super fun. Last live stream was super great. Actually, I didn't expect to have as many people. I'm not expecting to have as many people today, but I actually have a topic for today. So, even if nobody comes, I'm just going to talk to myself about the things that I normally talk to myself about during the day. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, weather is warm and stormy today in Prague. Dust Devil, hi. Well, yeah, I don't know about Prague. I've been there a few times, but it's just far too north for me, to be honest. Like, I like the Serbian weather. It's, it's kind of Mediterranean, but the problem with the place where I live, it's just too hot sometimes in the summer. But this summer, is this summer already, or is it still spring? It's still spring, right? But in any case, it hasn't been that hot because the last few summers were an absolute disaster. David, hi. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. I'm getting the hang of these live streams. Yeah, you grew up in Los Angeles. Yeah, over there, it's a completely different story, definitely. But I'll be honest with you, I like hot weather. I don't like the cold. And what I didn't know until I came to the north of Europe, you don't really realize that in some other places in the world, the day is, of different length. Because when you go up north, then usually in the winter, obviously the day is a little bit shorter and everybody's used to that. And when I was going to work over there, I go to work at night, in the morning, and already at like 4 o'clock, it's already completely dark. I hated that. Later on, I went to Norway, and over there, it's a complete disaster. But in Serbia, it's a good balance of that stuff, Summer starts in a week. Exactly. Yeah, it's about the 20th, 20 something of June, right? Yeah, but now we are in a period when the day is the longest practically. Yeah, so I love that. I love long days, and it really makes me feel, I don't know, it makes me feel young or something. Let me just switch the amplifier off. It's gonna heat the room up, and I'm not gonna be able to survive this live stream. Arizona, US. Oh yeah, it's it's hot over there. But I'll have to be honest. I always forget how to translate it. And this comes from an engineer. I always forget how to translate the Fahrenheit Celsius. So I'm just gonna deep seek it. All right. 42 Celsius. My God, that's a disaster. Let me just pick something up. This should be working now. All right, so let's see. Anthony Farish, Browntown, Arizona. Oh yeah. I've never been to Arizona, but I can only imagine that it's quite hot. Yeah, yeah. I know. I spend a lot of time in Dubai, and that would be approximately the same thing. Yeah, I just Adam, I just calculated it's 42 degrees Celsius. But yeah, I always forget the exact number, but my God, that's hot. I spent a lot of time in the Dubai weather during the summers, and on the ship where I worked, I was also responsible for all the fire detection systems. So I would have to take care of all those heat detectors, flame detectors, smoke detectors, and that kind of stuff. On the pool deck, during the summer in Dubai, you would get these heat detectors go off just like randomly in the heat because, they were German people don't calibrate them for Dubai, all right? And they don't allow you to recalibrate them. So, we just had alarms all day on the bridge. But yeah, I guess it's not my problem. Yeah, very hot weather. That's super cool. Now, let me show you something. I figured some stuff up because this time we actually have a working highlighting tool for chat. So I can actually make your chat pop up here. So whenever somebody says something, I can actually pop it up over there. I don't need to read it necessarily. So I guess some technical things are a little bit better. We also have some screen sharing. You also saw a little countdown, which is cool. Maybe, I don't know. Did you see the countdown that I made for you? It's just a picture of a desert and everybody from Arizona starts coming over to the live stream. That means something. Maybe next time I'm going to put up a different picture. Maybe I get some other people from different parts of the world. In any case. So what are we going to talk about today? I figured there are a lot of things that we can discuss. What I kind of don't want to do in these videos, but maybe I do it, maybe we address some some comments. Sometimes I understand a lot of people would like to have a little bit of drama, and sometimes I feel like I would like to address some comments, but I kind of cure myself from this, so I don't pay attention to a lot of these comments because my God, what some people comment, it is a disaster. But I would really like to address the important stuff, the really, really cool stuff from people who actually post cool stuff and comment cool stuff. And we had a comment from Stubborn last week, and he asked if we can talk about measuring output transformers. Therefore, I was kind of motivated to create a live stream and talk a little bit about transformers. I thought that would be informative to a lot of people, and it is also a good platform where I can talk and I don't need to process it and edit it and figure out how to make it as short as possible for YouTube and that kind of stuff. Now, I didn't post any videos today, not today, this week actually, because I didn't have time. I'm finishing up with the course. It is almost done, and for the people, it's absolutely ridiculous because people have bought the course already in the pre-sale period, right? Which is absolutely great. And for those people who are interested in that, the course is coming out, practically next week because I'm almost done. I just have to, just fix a few things up, and I'm gonna start uploading module by module as I finish the final editing, that kind of stuff. So the course is coming out next week, and after I release the entire course, then the price will go up. But I think the course is going to be absolutely ridiculous. I made a few big muffs. What you heard in the beginning, if you joined in the beginning, it is one of those that I made. The big muff is such a great topic. So I'll talk about the course a little bit later. So, hey, Chris from Jupiter Effects. All right, so I have to admit publicly that I was a moron, all right? And I have to publicly apologize to Chris because last time I was like super confused with the entire live thing, and I'm reading a JPTRFX. Who the fuck is this guy? And then I looked it up, and he's actually the guy who makes the Titan and who makes a bunch of really cool pedals. By the way, Chris, I looked up and sort of remembered that I did see you. I follow what you were doing. I just forget about that shit because I kind of stopped following a lot of stuff that's happening in the guitar world. So yeah, let me just quickly answer a few questions. So wait, right over here. So can you explain why load boxes generally suck in terms of altering the tone and feel of tube amps drastically? I have tried all of them, and while some are better than others, most are not it. Okay, so I'll be honest with you. I don't think that load boxes generally suck, but they definitely differ. And this is something that I will address in a video. What's up, everybody? Yeah, we've got new people coming up. It's amazing that I have people watching my live stream. I can't believe it. So I will make a video about load boxes because I have a fellow engineer who analyzed a bunch of them. He has very nice measuring equipment, and he measured some of these impedance curves from different load boxes that are on the market. And I'm going to make a video about that, discussing a little bit, because there were a lot of comments actually about load boxes like damaging your amplifier, breaking that stuff. So I'm going to jump into that a little bit more. So Fixer, I don't have an answer for your question like really, really quick, but I'm going to make a video about it. So stay tuned on the channel, definitely. All right, so a bunch of comments. Let me just take care of this. What does a transformer do in an amp? Something that guitar players can notice. That's exactly what I want to talk about today. Right, hey Xanders, you love your Jupiter effects pedals. Well, I actually never tried any of Chris's pedals. I watched the videos. They actually sound great. What I love about that whole stuff is that I like the style. I really love the style. And it seems like, it seems like a unique piece of equipment. By the way, Chris, I love your, since I'm in the Big Muff business now, what is the name of your Big Muff? War something? It's usually, if you're playing Big Muffs, must be something War. I love that pedal. It really sounded great. I watched a few videos of that pedal. It sounded really, really good. All right. So, hey, what's up? So, I can't read the comments that fast. So, maybe the bad experience with load boxes is amp dependent. Some amps don't really get different impedance response curves from a lot of load boxes. Warlaw, yeah, exactly. Warlaw is the Big Muffy style pedal. Really nice take on a Big Muff. But yeah, that's actually why I made that course, because you've got a bunch of Big Muffs, and there are a lot of things that you can do to mod them and make them unique. And there's a lot of nuances with the pedal, a lot of different flavors that you can explore with the Big Muff. So but in the end, it's all kind of the same thing, but it's not the same. Definitely a great pedal. Yeah, so definitely I'm gonna be making this video about load boxes. And Adam, to your question, what you just mentioned, I would definitely agree that, yeah, different amplifier structures and different amplifier architectures will respond differently to different load boxes, just like they would respond differently to different speakers. Because I think I mentioned that in a few videos, that it's all about the relationship. It's always about the interplay. I kind of mentioned that in the last video where I was, you make these provocative videos for modelers and that kind of stuff, and then you get the modeler army demanding that you give them proof, which I don't give a fuck about. But the whole point is that there is an interplay between all these things. And yeah, definitely some impedance curves would not be the best thing for some certain amplifiers, but yeah, definitely a video is needed to support some of these claims. I would need to think about it and make a nice video about that. So Anthony, trying to find the right Big Muff for your particular rig because is called muff diving. Yeah, definitely. Have I ever bought an amp from Guitar Center? Horrible. They are the GameStop of music gear. Well, I can't say. Last time I bought something from Guitar Center in the USA, it was a long time ago, and it was a guitar. It was not an amplifier, so I can't say. There was a time when Guitar Center was doing good work, but that's like 15 years ago. Since I don't live in the US, I don't really know. Okay, so David, you're asking a question. How many kilograms should the mains transformer in a 100-watt guitar amplifier weight? So I think that's a very good thing to start off with, talking about the power transformers. Now, if I was to answer your question, it would be very imprecise, because I know that some of the older people who were winding transformers, over here at least, they would measure the transformers in kilograms. And that is a very crude way of measuring power transformers. It tells you some kind of information where it's like, all right, so you need this many kilograms for an amplifier of this power or whatever. But that's a very crude way and an imprecise way to talk about it. Realistically, for guitar amplifiers, when we make power transformers, we have to take in account a lot of different things. And the problem with amplifier design, actually guitar amplifier design, is that you don't have a very clear vision of what you want to make. And I'll explain that in a second. So when you make some kind of hi-fi amplifier or some kind of pro audio amplifier that is supposed to deliver in certain amounts of power to work in certain conditions, then you have really clear conditions that you want to achieve. You want to achieve, like, usually what they go for is a minimal amount of THD, so total harmonic distortion. And usually when they make power transformers for that kind of stuff, if they're not like newer stuff with like SMPS. Hey Dave, um, what they do is they create in like ginormous transformers because a lot of people, especially from the audiophile world, they claim that these bigger transformers sound better. And yeah, it's I don't want to get into the details for that because we're going to waste a lot of time. But definitely, yeah, people make a lot bigger power transformers that than are actually needed for the amplifier to function properly. All right, so when it comes to guitar amplifier design, we want to achieve different things. It is not that simple. So yeah, so you are also mentioning EI transformers, not toroidal transformers. Yeah, these are two absolutely different things. And there are various reasons why we use EI transformers for amplifiers, even though toroidal transformers are in many ways uh, they're like kind of better and efficient, but not at all sizes. Let's just say it like that. But what happens with guitar amplifiers is that you are making decisions that are kind of weird because you're making an amplifier that is going to be abused. And sometimes you don't want to make like ginormous power transformers because they would make the amplifier a little bit maybe the right word would be stiff or stuff like that. It really depends on the power supply. It's not that simple, but definitely, yeah, it's hard to say um, how many kilograms you would need a transformer of. But what you want to do is you want to create a power transformer that fits that amplifier. Now, what does that mean? Well, you need to know what kind of power supply you're going for. One important thing that yeah, toroidal transformers can collapse if the amp is driven hard and loud. Pardon me. All right. So it doesn't really depend on the transformers. I would say yeah. There is something. Let's address that. So there is something about. There is something about toroidal transformers, and I'll be perfectly honest with you. It has been some time since I explored these topics, so I'm just speaking out of the top of my head. But as far as I remember, there is something when it comes to the magnetism of the core. There are some things called hysteresis. I think that's the right pronunciation. Curves. Now, in any case, these toroidal transformers, they saturate differently, and the EI, like iron core transformers, yet again, they kind of saturate differently. And I would just say differently because I don't want to get in like extremely deep into it, but they function in a different way. And for guitar amplifiers, even though if you make a toroidal transformer, the amplifier is going to function just fine, but you will get a little bit of a different result because of this magnetism and because of the way how this transformer saturates. This is really important for output transformers. But on the other hand, with toroidals, you can get like smaller transformers, less noise, a lot of amplifiers, and like rack gear uses toroidal transformers for power transformers, and that stuff works just fine. So I would say that that's just an engineer's approach. Um, Yeah, you're saying if the design is good, it doesn't matter much. Well, that's exactly the thing, because when you design these things, you have to take absolutely everything in account. And what I was going for is the fact that what you want to do is you want to decide on a power supply type. One of the important things there is what kind of rectification are you going to do. So obviously we have amplifiers with tube rectifiers, we have amplifiers with bridge rectifiers, and we also have those full wave rectifiers that require a center tapped transformer, or they don't require a center tapped transformer. I actually forgot these things, but for example, Marshall 50s, they would have the full wave rectification, and for that, you need a completely different voltage on the secondary to achieve the exact voltage that Marshall 50 has, for example, 450, 470 volts. So that kind of rectifier has a different efficiency compared to the bridge rectifier. Therefore, it is going to collapse in a different way. When you say collapse, yeah, the voltage collapses when you crank the amplifier up. So that is so Jupiter says Warlow. Yeah, maybe maybe he is not live. Maybe he is a little bit late. So that's a thing that's very important, to decide what kind of rectification you're gonna do, and depending on the transformer that you decide on using, you can sort of modify the power supply to compensate for whatever you're doing. So if you decide on a toroidal power transformer, yeah, definitely you can do something about the power supply and you can make it a great functioning amplifier. I don't think that would be a deal breaker on an amplifier. But there is a reason why we make these iron core transformers, and they're not the best, and also the core used is very, very different. So that stuff is rather complicated. Creating power transformers and designing them to work well with an amplifier, it is quite complicated. Yeah. So let me just address Mr. Mook. I'm currently trying to refresh my circuit analyzing skills with the help of the famous book Art of Electronics Part 3. Who else is using it as a learning source together with LT Spice? Well, let me tell you something. When you start the course next week, you will have these lessons about LT Spice and a lot of stuff about analyzing circuits. So I'm pretty sure that you will be able to follow, because everything is designed for beginners. So yeah, definitely. But The Art of Electronics is a legendary book. I had to learn my electronics from ground zero. So and I used all of these books that are available outside of my language space, right? So power transformers. Now, in general, why do power transformers? That's kind of the general question, where people ask, why do transformers make a difference? Because I saw some of these things on the internet. There was actually, that's a good thing. There was a channel that I recently found out, and it's called something like mastering something. All right. So it is a guy doing some type of mastering business, whatever. And it was quite interesting because he made some videos which got a bunch of views, where he was explaining how all these monitors are crap, all the audio interfaces are crap, and everything is crap. And basically it's a little bit negative, but he's got a lot of good points. And for sure, there are things in the industry that are not as good as they are marketed. Me being one who made videos about some of these things, for sure. But whenever I talk about these things and whenever I make a video like that, my idea is not to be an asshole towards a company. Unless we're talking about these big companies, of course. But I try to be objective about the thing, because there is a huge portion of the community who claim that they hear different things, that different things matter. And on the other hand, you've got all of these guys who are claiming it's all bullshit, So I think, yet again, I think I said it in the last stream, or I don't remember, but can't there be some kind of middle ground? You know, I understand modelers sound great, you know, they do a lot of great things, but don't just come and tell me that, you know, modelers do everything, tube amps are shit. Like, fuck off, you know? Go play your modeler, okay? And that's completely fine. I do both. Can I just do both? You know what I mean? So when it comes to amplifiers, when people in the amplifier world start talking about these small things about amplifiers that make a difference, they talk about the power supply. Now, I started talking about this channel that I saw, and I saw some of these videos with a lot of great tips. And at some point, there was some kind of interview with some guy who is demystifying everything in the audiophile world, claiming that everything is shit. And at some point, they came to the topic of like power supplies and cables and stuff like that. Neither of them are engineers. Neither of them made an amplifier in their life, you know, even though they're not stupid, they're knowledgeable. And that person in question who has that channel, he does a lot of, you know, he's doing some kind of mastering, so he knows stuff, you know, stuff that he's saying. He's not an imbecile, all right? But then they come and claim it is just a power supply. It just gives you voltage. It just does that. Well, don't go to that territory, all right? Because I'm gonna smash you. No, but honestly, it is not like that. Power transformers, or actually power supplies, don't give you just some kind of voltage. It doesn't work like that. It is much easier in the modular world, but when it comes to amplifiers and that kind of stuff, I'm sorry, but you know, it doesn't work that way. There are a lot of nuances when it comes to the transformer. Now, why does the transformer make a difference in an amplifier? Well, here's the thing. When you have a secondary in a transformer, that secondary is some kind of coil of wire wound around some kind of bobbin, right? There's some kind of core, and it is an electronic component that has a certain impedance. When it has a certain impedance, it would have a different impedance at different frequencies. Obviously, it is frequency dependent. And that impedance is always in parallel with all your filtering capacitors, with all your stuff in most amplifiers, all right? And it makes a difference depending on how you wind the transformer. If you use thicker wire, then you would have a little bit maybe less resistance depending on how many turns you use. Depending on the core, you're gonna have a different inductance, obviously number of winds and stuff like that. So it's gonna have an impedance, and it is definitely there in the circuit. And even though that, you know, you're going to use a lot of these capacitors that are going to filter out the signal at like 0.01 hertz, there is something about this whole thing that makes a difference sonically in the end. You know, no matter how many times I tried something, there's always something different about these things. And yeah, a lot of people do, like, you don't do blind tests. I do blind tests all the time because I'm interested in this stuff. All right, let me just take a look at a few comments. So, Adam, I think people insecure in their own tastes, and people are demanding that people must use the same type of gear that they use, and that everything is shit unless they bought it. Oh God, we're gonna be talking about that. You know, I absolutely agree. The new Line 6 modeler will try to model the power supply too. Well, yeah, they do these things, you know, like people who make these modelers are also not stupid. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it well, like really, really well. That's, you know, that's a fact. This stuff is great, but amplifiers are just different. And, you know, here we talk about amplifiers. So, and I like amplifiers. So Chris Wood saying, I'm coming from the Marshall Plexi world. The power supply collapsing is very much a part of the sound. It is crucial to the sound. Absolutely crucial to the sound, I would say. Especially when it comes to the, you know, Marshall Plexis, especially when it comes to the 50s. You know what I mean? So I absolutely agree. So I was talking about these power supplies and the transformers and that kind of impedance that you would have on the secondary. That makes a difference. Then you get into the fact that there is like a, you know, temporal component to the whole thing where you are playing the amplifier. The moment when you hit the strings, you are sort of, demanding current. And at that particular moment, when you demand current from the power supply is going to give you current, but it really depends on how fast it's going to give you the current. Or maybe, here's the thing, I have to kind of digress here. Older amplifiers, back in the day, tubes were super cheap, unlike today, and capacitors were super expensive. And you would see that old amplifiers design features capacitors of like 8 microfarads. In today's world, that's ridiculous, right? Because usually most of the amplifiers now would have at least like 100 microfarads of filtering, like equivalent filtering capacitance in the amp. If you go into the hi-fi world and that kind of stuff, they employ like 10,000 microfarads, 20,000 microfarads. It's ridiculous, right? So there's a lot of filtering happening. But with the old amps, you had these small capacitors, and they would discharge very quickly, and they would need some time to fill up because of the tube rectifier. And that is the sag that we are talking about. And usually what these modelers do when they model the sag is, they model kind of the frequency response and sort of the effect of sag, but I never found it that it's exactly the same. It's usually claimed that it's the same by people who never played a really saggy amplifier. That's I would just say. So Mr. Mook, I prefer Tonex for guitar playing at home in front of my amplifier. So do I, because the amplifier that I have next to me gets quite hot. And sometimes I just play the Tonex or the plugins or something because I'm too lazy to plug in the rest of the gear, right? Yeah, I agree, Dave. Yeah. So in general, we kind of agree. The people that are over here, we tend to agree about this whole thing with the modelers and the amplifiers. But what I was talking about, we were talking about the power supply, and specifically we were talking about the power transformers. So power transformers, usually if you want to make an amplifier that needs a certain amount of current, you would definitely need to create a power transformer that can deliver that amount of current. It is a very bad idea to use thin wire that cannot deliver the amount of current because the wire is going to get hot, it's going to burn. But stuff is like very different nowadays than it was back in the day because the wire that we are using is different. The insulation is much better on the wire. Therefore, you can wind the transformer differently. You can layer it differently. You can use less insulation. Therefore, you're going to end up with a little bit different specification of a transformer. The wire doesn't really burn today, especially if you make the transformer to be the right dimensions. But you're sort of it's always a trade-off because you have to make the trade-off between the thickness of the wire and the amount of magnetic saturation that you're going to work with, right? The magnetic flux. Now my English is not working. I can't remember the exact scientific name for that, but you're kind of always striking a deal between the how hard are you going to push the wires and how hard are you going to push the actual core with the magnetism, and you can achieve different results with that. So transformer design can get a little bit more complicated, but it definitely makes a huge difference in amplifiers depending on what kind of transformers you use. Also, you've got different layouts. You've got not different layouts, but different styles of laying out the EI cores, and you have different EI cores. Now, the cores that we have today are so much better than the old cores. And I would argue that new power transformers are much, much better than the old ones. But when it comes to output transformers, then we are entering a whole different area of problems, I would say. So here's the thing. with output transformers are very different from power transformers. I mean, yeah, you use a core, you wind some wire around it, but output transformers are basically impedance matching devices. Therefore, you have to account this frequency response that is going to be happening. And also, you have to take in account the fact that the architectures of these amplifiers that we use, there is always some kind of voltage on the transformer. Therefore, the core is already kind of saturated. If we didn't have this saturation on the power transformer, because normally in most of our amplifiers you are going to connect the high tension voltage to the center tap of the primary. Therefore, you're gonna get all these voltages in the whole push-pull arrangement. The problem with that is that you're sort of already saturating the core a little bit with DC. Therefore, when we crank the amplifier, when we start playing hard, the transformer saturates, and that gives us this whole thing with tube amplifiers. Like, a lot of that tone comes from that place, if you know what I mean. So it's quite complicated. But I did want to mention, because Mr. Stubborn asked on the channel, how do you measure an output transformer? And I thought that would be like really interesting. So can you replace a power tube with an FET MOSFET in cascode topology? Well, let me tell you something. I can't tell you right away because I never tried it. I never even thought of doing that. There are a lot of different amplifier designs out there, and a lot of different things that work and don't work. FETs and MOSFETs can be used in various different great ways inside of tube amplifiers, but I never actually thought of replacing the power tubes. Usually when people go with some kind of different topology for the power amplifier, they would go with more of these topologies that have actually proven themselves and that are maybe easier to build. That's why you have a lot of Class D amplifiers, because that's sort of popular. It's efficient. It does a thing. I mean, power tube, yeah, IRF 840 is a good candidate, but I never thought of putting it using it instead of a power tube. They can be good driver sections, So, tube powered power amplifiers are not that good. They're great for guitar. We like that stuff on guitar, but if you go into the hi-fi world, a lot of people don't like them. And realistically, really depends on what kind of music you're listening to. And I don't want to get into the audiophile thing, but yeah, depending on what kind of music you listen to, a lot of people who don't listen to like jazz or classical music, they don't really like these tube power amplifiers. They like some different architectures that are gonna yield better low end response and maybe even better high end response. And that's that is a fact, I would say. So there's that, right? So let me go back to what I wanted to talk about, the output transformers in guitar amplifiers. So if you want to measure output transformers, how would you go about it? There are different things that you can measure in an output transformer. And for guitar players, maybe I don't want to make this some kind of engineering talk, but for guitar players, maybe that thing is important because there are a lot of products on the market that promise that they're going to give you something, where a lot of the times when I look at these products, I think to myself, like, okay, how did they do that? Because whenever you do something in the engineering business, you can do it two ways. You can do it the right way, and then there's the way of, it kind of works the way, but with a lot of these products, they just market them so that they do certain things. I'm talking specifically about some products that offer a lot of different options of tubes, like you can use EL34s and 6L6s in this amplifier, and it's, you're going to get this 6L6 flavor. I'll be honest with you, to me, that's complete and utter bullshit. There you go. But yeah, and I will explain now why. So we've got this output transformer, and the output transformer is this very nice, sophisticated device that is supposed to make the power tubes compatible with our speaker. Why do we do that? Well, because power tubes actually work at high voltages and low currents. But the speakers, they don't work on high voltages and low currents. They need a lower voltage and more current, right? That's why we have the output transformer. This is a classic tube power amplifier. I have to say that there are some tube power amplifiers that don't have an output transformer. They would have some different like driver sections, but they never became as popular as the ones that we always use. We never actually had. I don't know any. I don't know of any tube guitar tube amplifier that uses that topology, but I know from the old books like it exists. Now, in any case, we use this output transformer to match the whole thing, to adapt our power tubes to our speaker, and vice versa, because it sort of it's like a mirroring thing, right? And what we can measure when we want to measure output transformers is we can measure the impedance. Normally, how you do that is you're going to use an impedance meter or some kind of RLC meter. Now, I use for this purpose, I use the, what is it, Keysight. I have this small handheld Keysight. It serves me well. There are better impedance meters that are in different forms, like static, bigger devices. They're quite expensive depending on the precision and all other different kinds of parameters that this device can have. But I do use the Keysight. It serves me well. And what I can measure with the Keysight is I can measure the impedance at different frequencies. Now, as impedance is frequency dependent, whenever I measure an output transformer, what I like to measure is I like to measure the impedance at different frequencies. Usually what you have and what you know, what's written on the websites when you go about buying a new output transformer, when you look at whatever, tube data sheets and whatever is written on the internet is usually measured at 1 kilohertz. All right. And the number that you get, so this amount of impedance that you get at 1 kilohertz should be measured when you apply load to the secondary. Because what you want to see how is the load translated across the the output transformer. That is actually what's important, because you can't measure this with no load. So that is one of the measurements. And I would measure this at different frequencies. And then you would realize that by measuring that, you're going to see, all right, so at 1 kilohertz, if I use, for example, an 8 ohm resistor, so I have precisely 8 ohms connected to the secondary, for example, an 8 ohm tap, I want that to reflect me a value that is good for my tubes. So, for example, for a quartet of EL34s, you want it to be around 2,000 ohms. And it really depends. Now we're coming to something interesting. This might be interesting for some people who heard about British style amplifiers or Marshalls sounding better at 16 ohms. When you measure the Marshall transformer the way how I measured it now, you will realize that when you measure it with a 4 ohm load, obviously always connected to the appropriate output, so the 4 ohm output to the 4 ohm load, you're going to get the value. Usually for the old Marshalls, around about 1800 ohms, all right? And when you measure it for 8 ohms, you're going to get the approximately the same thing. But when you measure it 16 ohms with a 16 ohm load, you're going to get a higher amount, around 2.2K. And a lot of people claim they sound different at 16 ohms. Yes, it's measurable. And they do sound a little bit different, but it is measurable, and it is exactly what I'm telling you now. When you measure them, you will see that at different loads, they would measure a little bit differently. This is because of the way how the transformer is wound, and not all transformers do this. But what my point is now is that we need to know this amount, we need to know this impedance, and we need to know what kind of tubes are we going to use with this amplifier, because different tubes require a different load. And that is the load for the tubes is this impedance that is reflected across the transformer from the speaker. All right. So not all tubes can work with the same load. And what a lot of companies do, which offer you these different options like EL34s in an amplifier, 6L6s in an amplifier, that kind of thing, they would create a power transformer that is sort of somewhere in between, so it kind of works with all the different tubes. But what you want to do is you want to make the perfect conditions for this particular type of tube, because 6L6s and EL34s are different, and obviously we have a lot of different output, actually power tubes, and they require different loads. Therefore, I always prefer creating a power output transformer which is designed for those particular tubes. Now, I don't know. There was this new amplifier like Zuno. It was called Zuno or something like that. And I would say that that amplifier was interesting, but I don't know if they do any kind of switching on the power transformer, because you can also create some taps on the power transformer to actually do this kind of switching and to fix this and to really make an amplifier adapt to 6L6s, to EL34s and that kind of thing. So I had this comment. I didn't see that the comment was on the screen. So let me just read a few comments. All right. So Fryet stopped doing power tube switching on the Ultra Lead in the 90s for this exact reason. Yeah, Fryet, whenever you listen to Fryet talk about things, he kind of talks a lot. It's a little bit funny, but he knows what he is doing. And yeah, that is the main reason. And what I just said, like, technically you can create some kind of power transformer out. Oh my God. An output transformer, people were talking output transformers, that would do all these things, but it would need to be big and you would need to do a lot of these taps. It is a custom-made transformer. Not all companies can do this. Most companies actually just buy the transformers that you have available on the market already. So David, I have seen a Vox guitar amp where the first gain stage is an LND 150 MOSFET. There you go. It is a depletion mode MOSFET, a very interesting device, and you can make a lot of different things with the LND 150 MOSFET. And you can bias them very similarly to tubes. So, yeah. Okay, so you guys following? You guys alive? What's happening right here? I see I've got 25 people, 26 people online listening to me talk about transformers. That's unbelievable. By the way, these lives, I like these lives. Call your friends to visit our live sessions and like the video if it's not too hard for you, because I would really like these lives to get more viewers, because I think here is where the real information is. Not all those stupid videos of 10 minutes where, you try to say something smart and then people argue in the comments. Now, output transformers. So you need to know this impedance number, right? Impedance number needs to be adapted for the tubes. Obviously, one thing that confuses some people, whoever thinks about this, right, is the fact that you've got like pairs of tubes and you've got like quartets of tubes, because we are in some kind of push-pull arrangement over here. And what you need to know is that you need to divide this impedance with the number of tubes that you are using, because it's divided equally, or at least it should be divided equally by the tubes, right? Because if you have 4 tubes, then you are going to divide this impedance. So if you have, let's say, a 2K output transformer primary, that would usually reflect as 8K for one of the tubes, if that makes sense. I don't know if that is the right logic for explaining it, but since they are all in parallel and they are shared, for each tube to see the right load, if there's 4 of them, you would need to make it 2K. But if you read in the data sheet, maybe the tube wants 8K. So that would be the corresponding. I hope that I explained that well. I talk a lot. So that's basically okay. So we've got a quick question. So does the negative feedback tapped off a certain tap have any effect on that tap's impedance? Well, here is a good explanation for that. You derived negative feedback of the secondary. Now, the secondary is kind of made with very, very thick wire, as that's the way how it needs to be made, so it can supply more current. So the negative feedback, I mean, technically, it doesn't affect the impedance per se. It does in a way, but it doesn't affect it in this very simple way. Negative feedbacks are super complicated, and you've got books written on negative feedbacks, and sometimes it's very complicated to calculate all that. Now, Chris from Jupiter Effects says negative feedback makes the amp lame or awesome. Yeah, you know, there was a period. I gotta tell you a story. Back on GitCon, I remember there were 2 Italian guys, Andrea and I don't know, Ignazio. It was not Ignazio, but 2 Italian guys, really, really cool guys, older guys. One was more of like this digital engineer. The other one was like an analog engineer, and they collaborated with Joyo. Maybe you know, Chris, maybe you were following this. They made this amplifier with Joyo, and I don't know what happened there exactly, but they made their own amplifier down in Italy, and they made some deal with Joyo, and then they came with this new Joyo amplifier, which was great because there was an application with which you can do a lot of switching in the amplifier. And it was ridiculous because you could do a bunch of like relayed switched operations in the amplifier. One of those was the removal of negative feedback. And what Chris is saying over here, more lame, less fire-breathing Van Halen machine. So, yeah, negative feedback is a great topic. I remember, since when you remove negative feedback, and I'll do that in one of the live streams, maybe in one of the videos, because I have some amplifiers where I can switch out the negative feedback. Or actually, I have an amplifier that... Oh, this one can do it as well. That's a great thing because, you know, I make a lot of switches. Let's warm it up. But it's very interesting because stuff becomes louder when you remove negative feedback. And in a funny way, it becomes better. And one of the reasons why negative feedback was used back in the day is because the components were not that good and there was a lot of noise introduced into the signal, and people would use a lot of negative feedback because of the noise. Now, that is not the only reason, but one of the reasons. Now, today, if we like to remove the negative feedback, we can, and sometimes it actually sounds absolutely ridiculously good, you know, without negative feedback. And I love amplifiers without negative feedback. Everything feels like, I don't know. I mean, this is just really subjective. It kind of feels like going one way. It's direct. There is a feeling to negative feedback. As I said, this is subjective, but whenever you do some kind of negative feedback circuits, even in the preamplifier, when you do like negative feedbacky business, it kind of feels a little bit different. It's not bad, but it can be a little bit different. Exactly. So Chris says, makes it the amp louder, but also more power amp distortion. So definitely, if you want to have an amplifier that has a lot of power amp distortion, then negative feedback is essentially your enemy, because what the negative feedback does, it is sort of trying to compensate for your amplifier. The more you turn it up, it is compensating and compensating until it reaches a point that it cannot compensate anymore, but it's sort of trying to make it not distort. Now, there are also benefits to negative feedback, because when you use negative feedback, you are getting a broader frequency range. Now, this becomes ridiculously complicated, because when you design an amplifier, when you want to decide on how much of the negative feedback you want to apply to that amplifier really depends on the output transformer. It really depends on that, because depending on how you wind the output transformer, depending on where your okay, it's gonna get a little bit engineering, but where your poles of the filters, like oscillations, where they're happening, you would apply or not apply negative feedback. It depends on that, but that's like a little bit too complicated, and sometimes you just don't think about it. A lot of times when I would work on stuff, I would be like, okay, what do I want to achieve? And then I would go for a certain amount of negative feedback in an amplifier, but it really depends on the amplifier, like absolutely. So let me just jump through a few comments very quickly. Fryette amps do negative feedback in the preamp too. Yeah, Fryette has a lot of amplifiers. It's an interesting thing. You can do, you can achieve various amazing things with negative feedback in the preamp sections. It is something that is not explored by a lot of amplifier builders because they copy the same amplifier all the time. So, No Things says, hey, good, I made it to your live. As always, so much good information. Did you already talk about how transformers have an influence, how quick and responsive the amp is? Well, No Things, this live has been live since, how long are we live? Almost an hour, which is ridiculous. I feel like it has been 10 minutes. But yes, we were talking about the power transformers. Now we are at the output transformer part of the talk. But yeah, we were mentioning some of those things. I guess you're going to rewatch the video, so you're going to hear about it a little bit earlier when we talked about it. So Jupiter effects, if you want power amp distortion, it's the way. If not, there are two ways of adding negative feedback or more output power. All right, so Anthony, hey. So David says amp will be more stable with negative feedback. Yeah, that's exactly those oscillations that I was talking about. That was about stability. Too much negative feedback, Chris Wood says, will induce oscillations. That is also correct. Usually on lower frequencies. Stuff like motorboating can happen. That's why a lot of amplifiers would design a little bit different negative feedbacks than the ones you would see in a Marshall. All right. So where was I? Oh, okay. So I'm reading the comments. Let me drink something, and then I'll be continuing my amazing talk that I'm doing here. So where were we? Negative feedback. Yeah. So here's the thing. You've got some amplifiers that have more and some amplifiers that have less negative feedback. And for example, the high watt, my favorite thing. Everybody has their favorite thing. And you can clearly see that Fryette is a high watt guy, right? Negative feedback in high watts is kind of weird because it's good when there's less. It's also good when there's a lot of it. Because Aradie, hey, if you listen to David Gilmour, and if you are going for that kind of setup, it's stupid to go for that kind of sound because nobody sounds like David Gilmour. But if you're going for an inspired by David Gilmour thing, his high watts, I'm pretty confident that they used 16 ohm tap on the so they use the 16 ohm tap for the negative feedback. That's what I wanted to say. However, some high watts, especially the school of like the more distorted school of Alex Lifeson and also like Pete Townsend, I think they would use less negative feedback on their high watts, and I like the 4 ohm tap, and it makes the amplifier sound and feel completely different. That's just my take on it. So Anthony Farish, look at this, people. I gotta send you some love, man. I'm too stoned to sound like David Gilmour. Me too. Not now. Later. But yeah, I can sound like Limp Bizkit. Yeah, I can't. I sound like shit now. But yeah, definitely. The David Gilmour sound, like the high watt specifically, sounds. You know, if it's not a 16 ohm tap, it's not a 74 high watt sound. You know what I mean? And I tried a bunch of them, and but it also sounds great at 4 ohms, and it also feels much better when you crank it up, like the stuff that you would see like Freyet do. And when they talk about these high watts, they talk about them cranked up, which is absolutely ridiculous, you know. But yeah, that stuff sounds better with 4 ohms and feels better with 4 ohms. And the 16 ohms is like it makes the low end completely different, makes it more, I would say, like, make it more hi-fi. That's why I'm just saying, like, the David Gilmour thing, that's a lot of negative feedback. So let me just demonstrate it quickly for you guys. Let me see if everything works. Can you hear the guitar? All right, so this is my Fender Super Twin Reverb, and I've got a few options on the Super Twin Reverb. Now, I don't remember what tap I used, or actually there is only one tap on this amplifier. It's only a 4 ohm tap, so definitely it's a 4 ohm tap. Definitely, I have to remember these things. Sorry, guys, you know. But yeah, it is a 4 ohm tap, and this is like the classic Fender type of sound. So it is a 180 watt twin reverb, and it sounds clean. All right. Now, I have an option to disengage the negative feedback, and I hope it's not going to clip out anything, but let's hear it quickly. Now that Freyet power station over there is receiving the exactly louder equals better, definitely. So yeah, but you need to crank the amplifier a lot for this. So that's basically that. That's the difference. So now you can hear it like firsthand. All right, so if I return it, obviously it's not as loud. So, you know, to make this proper, we would need to compensate for the volume. But maybe maybe I can compensate for the volume. Let's make another quick test. All right, so now this is without negative feedback, but I sort of rolled the volume down a little bit. But yet again, you're not doing the thing that you need to be doing when you're, you know, disengaging the negative feedback, and that is actually pushing the power amplifier. Now, what is the actual difference? Realistically, there is a lot of difference, even if we would make this test now completely, like fully, honestly, and just, David, offenders have like 22 kilo ohm negative feedback resistor. No, not this one. No, they usually have smaller resistors, like 820 ohms. It's like a different range, but it actually doesn't really matter as long as you make the ratio between the feedback resistor and, what's it called, the tail resistor on the phase inverter, depending on where you're engaging the negative feedback. As long as the ratio is the same, it doesn't make a huge difference. But what was I talking about? Yeah, I was talking about when you disengage the negative feedback and when you engage it back, even if we made this comparison like fully correct, making, like volume compensations and everything, making a comparison like that, it doesn't really make sense, right? That's the first thing that I have to say. But what happens, what I don't like sometimes, and I absolutely understand why Chris is saying that he likes it. What makes a big difference is how the low end is. The low end is very different because you get a lack of dampening. All right, and here we are coming slowly to the story of why certain amplifiers, the story from the beginning of this live stream, why certain amplifiers sound okay with some load boxes and don't sound okay like with some other load boxes and that kind of stuff. So I misclicked, but I clicked correct. So Jupiter effects louder equals better. The biggest truth of this live stream. So the low end is different because now you don't have any dampening, and the difference you would, since you're not having any dampening, then the cabinet that you are using is going to sound completely different. And that is sometimes a problem. Now, it is okay with certain amplifiers, such as the Vox, for example. It is also okay with certain amplifiers, such as the Mesa Boogie Rectifier, But a lot of people don't like the Mesa Boogie Rectifier, and one of the main reasons why they don't like the Mesa Boogie Rectifier, and this is just my take on this, one of the reasons why they don't like it is because it doesn't have any negative feedback on that third channel, right? Depending on which exact rectifier, but it's like very bassy. People call that boomy, right? I think I made a video about that. So it makes it a little bit more boomy. With some cabinets, it sounds great. And I completely understand why Chris from Jupiter Effects likes that, because we are sort of similar when it comes to taste of music. I like it loose. I like it like fully loose and evil and nasty, and I don't care if I'm getting that power amp distortion. I just want it. I don't care if it's boomy. It needs to be boomy. I wish it blows your head off. That's how I like my amplifiers. So that's why most of my amplifiers, I do have that switch. Okay, so take a look at this. All right, so yet again, Jupiter Effects, there is difference in boomy where there is good boomy and bad boomy. Absolutely. Because if you design an amplifier that, for example, you decide that you are going to build an amplifier that will not have any negative feedback, you would make some compensations in the circuit before the signal reaches the power amplifier, or you would create the power amplifier a little bit differently. You would create the power supply maybe a little bit differently, because everything matters. And then you are going to end up with something that sounds great. As Chris says, there's a difference in boomy, good boomy and bad boomy. Bad boomy is really bad. Bad boomy is sometimes a disaster, but that's not to say that we're just talking about a situation where you are disengaging negative feedback in an amplifier that was designed with negative feedback in mind. That might not sound good. That is the point of everything what I'm trying to say here. If the amplifier was designed with negative feedback in mind, maybe if it was designed well, all right, then, maybe it's supposed to sound like that. When you disengage the negative feedback, it might not sound that good because it was not designed for not having negative feedback in mind. I think that's completely logical. And the story that I wanted to tell you is, like, I remember Phil X came over there to GitCon, and once he was trying this Joyo amplifier, and I went over there and disengaged the negative feedback for him, and he was like, "My God, this is amazing! What did you do?" It was just louder, but it felt a little bit better. It was like more gain, and immediately he was like, "I want to play this amplifier tonight." So, and he did. So it's interesting. it's an interesting topic. Like negative feedback, super interesting. Um, yeah, let me just engage this. You don't have any noise on your end. We have a discussion in the comments about okay, so Adam said my issue with the dual rectifier is the farty choppy tracking in the low end. Um and the trademark pubic hair thin PCB traces on the Mesa. Thank you. Yeah, as much as we love the rectifiers, they do have some problems about them. So Chris says it's bad designed, but it made it sound iconic 90s metal. It's all over the place. Sound wise, makes good. Sometimes we need to make mistakes to the right time. Yeah. It's absolutely that I personally love the Mesa Boogie rectifier. But it is a thing. I like to do some mods to it. And the the Mesa Boogie rectifier that I have on the Slightly Technical Academy as part of these Tonex packs really sounds good. And that's the one that I modded. It's a 3-channel one, and I modded it, but I didn't mod it in a way how I've seen some people mod Mesas on the internet, because some people mod Mesas and create something completely different out of them, which is yet again super fine if you're into that. But my idea was I want to create something that's still gonna be a Mesa. I just want to tailor it just a little bit. You know, I wanted it to be a rectifier, but I changed some stuff a little bit. So David says speakers matter too for negative feedback. For example, typical selection V30 versus an Electro Voice EM12. Well, um, speakers matter. Cabinets matter, I would say. Cabinets matter not more, but the relationship between the speaker and the cabinet. I think that's very important. Whenever I say speaker, I kind of think about the whole system, cabinet and the speaker. Because the cabinet is going to make a speaker work differently, completely differently. Dave Barry, I love negative feedback in a transistor-based preamp pedal circuits. Well, yeah, there are some of these circuits. There are a lot of these circuits, especially ones made with FETs that employ some negative feedback and can be like really, really nice. So, what were we talking about? Can somebody remind me? Are we alive? Yeah, I was telling you that story about Phil liking that lack of negative feedback and amplifiers with no negative feedback. It's a stoner type of thing. I absolutely love it. The amplifiers feel raw, you know? But yeah, might not work for everybody, for everything. Let me jump back to yeah, Jupiter FX raw amps. I'm gonna leave that here while I speak. Yeah, definitely raw amps. That's a thing that modelers will never do. Raw amps. All right, so I was talking about the output transformers and how we measure the impedance of the output transformers. Why is the impedance important? We sort of strayed on the road talking about negative feedback. But what else can we measure in output transformers? So, output transformers, we can actually make some measurements now without load, right? So we want to measure the inductance, for example, of the output transformer. Whenever I would have certain output transformers that I like, and I would like to, make some measurements and then make some notes about those measurements, so I know when I'm designing something, when I'm working on something, what I want to achieve, I would measure the inductance. And inductance you also measure at different frequencies. What is the most important thing about inductance is measuring inductance at lower frequencies. Even though a lot of people are gonna measure inductance at like 1 kilohertz, which is the typical thing that you're gonna do, like, and post that kind of shit on the internet. But if you want to have some additional information, you would like to measure For example, what I like to do, I like to measure it at 100 hertz. Gives me a little bit of a different number, but I like to have that number. Now, why is that important? Why do you need to know the inductance of the output transformer? Well, it's going to determine how your low end response is going to be in your amplifier. And I think that's super, super important. And what I'm going to do now, something that's super, super important, I'm going to switch this amplifier off and switch the air conditioning on because I'm going to die. Oh, we got to survive that, all right? So, measuring inductance, very, very interesting thing because by measuring inductance, you will get some really nice information about your output transformer, and then you kind of realize that sometimes you don't want to have a lot of inductance, which is weird because the more inductance you have, essentially, let's just say it, all right? Having more inductance in a thing such as a guitar pickup or like like transformer, it's better. It's going to be bigger. It's going to have more turns. It's going to have like more efficient cores. Makes it more like efficient. But you don't want that sometimes. And when you don't want that? Well, you don't want it in a Marshall, for example, because what happens? I'm just gonna ask this because David, you asked choke transformers. What is a choke transformer? So let me just move this. It's blowing directly in my head. So you want to know this inductance, and you don't want it in Marshalls. Why you don't want it in Marshalls? Well, because the fact that the Marshall has this relatively bad output transformer, it gives it the Marshall sound. And I know that because a lot of people will build Marshall clones. Sometimes I would get these Marshall clones, I would service these Marshall clones, and you have to make, even though a lot of these builds are great, unless you have the Marshall transformer, it's not gonna sound exactly like a real Marshall. And getting like a good Marshall transformers is sometimes a little bit tricky. We had these companies like Mercury Magnetics, you've got Hammond. Leo, hey, well, a little bit late, but we're still here. So if you go out and buy some of these transformers, and I've seen people do that, and they put that transformer in the Marshall, and then they feel like, oh my god, it sounds so much better. Usually what they get is they're gonna get a wider frequency response from the amplifier. The oscillations, first thing, are going to be different, and oscillations are very important in Marshalls, especially like JCM 800s and stuff like that. The fact that they sometimes sound shrill and stop sounding shrill when you turn the amplifier up, when you saturate the transformer, that's a big thing in the sound. But also, they don't have that much low end. And a lot of people who would change the transformer in the Marshall, they would be like fully satisfied because you would get the loudness effect, right? But it's not really the Marshall thing. The Marshall thing is actually a shitty transformer made with like really bad cores, which are hard to come by today. And obviously, you can wind the wire and do that kind of thing. I mean, these output transformers in Marshalls and most of the like Fender output transformers, they're like not really well engineered. Output transformers for audiophile equipment are crazy. Like the way how you can make them, all the stuff that you can do, it can get like really sophisticated. Guitar amp transformers are not that sophisticated, most of them. But I'm just stating that making a huge output transformer doesn't suit some amplifiers, such as the Marshall, and making them like really highly inductive and the stuff like that. You're gonna have a lot more low end if you want that, but it's not going to be the vintage Marshall thing. I'm just saying that. On the other hand, some other amplifiers do benefit from like really, really good transformers. High watts are one thing because they had these partridge transformers, which were back in the day really good. And still to this day, they do have a thing, but those transformers are more like hi fi compared to other guitar amplifier brands. So, Leo, last time you told me not to buy a Marshall. Could I elaborate why? Well, I don't like to tell people what to buy. I was making a little bit of a joke. I don't like to tell people what to buy and what not to buy. What I like to tell people is just some honest opinions about certain things that I come across, stuff that I work on. What I do believe is that there are better products than Marshall amplifiers that you can buy, especially in the low price range and even in the higher price range. I will say that there were a few models. Most of them actually sound okay. Most of them sound good. I was mentioning last live stream that I want to try that JTM. I saw a lot of people were really, really satisfied with the JTM. I recently modded one of these new from the same series. Is that Studio Vintage or something like that? Modded a like plexi type of Marshall. The reason why I advise people not to buy them is because they can fail miserably and they're really hard to service, especially everything like after the year 2000. I just don't like them. Most of them, like the newer ones are a little bit better. The new ones, like last 2-3 years, stuff like that. Everything older than that, like thin PCBs, low quality components, bad wiring layout, failing like it's just pieces of shit. There are so many other brands that give you even that a much better Marshall sound, and even for less money. But I would just go with the smaller brands. That's why I said that. Not to I'm making some jokes on Marshall's behalf. I don't care. These are big companies. Maybe they should go and make fridges and whatever they do. So let me. So Adam is asking, doesn't Mojitone use Haybor transformers? I don't know. Honestly, Haybor transformers are hard to come by over here in the US. You can get them. I heard like David Friedman, I know that he uses them and he says that they're great. I would tend to believe that, but yeah, some of these new transformers are not that good. Not that they're not good. They're actually better than the Marshall transformer. They're just not the Marshall thing. That's just what I'm trying to say. So we've got some Freddy Cadet Mercury magnetics in my Marshall Super Bass doesn't make much difference. There you go. I don't know. They're different models. I don't remember what. It has been some time since I made this test when somebody came and we actually replaced a transformer, and I think it was a Hammond one. I don't remember what it was. That's why I made these comments that I made. So Adam saying transformers are the most expensive part of the amp. Yeah, definitely. So do with that information what you want. All right. So Sep asking, are there toroidal guitar amp transformers and do they sound different? Very nice question. So we already spoke about toroidal transformers earlier in the video, but they do exist and you will find them in a lot of rack gear, and you will also find toroidal transformers in a lot of transistor amplifiers, and toroidal transformers are great. In many ways, toroidal transformers are better than, pardon me, these EI iron core transformers. Let me just fix something up. Gotta stop smoking. Even the 2 cigarettes a day that I smoke make my nose run. So toroidal transformers are different because they do have a different core. There are some benefits to them, but the core saturates in a different way. Therefore, for output transformers, toroidal ones are not preferred because of the way how the core saturates. And that's why we mostly use these iron cores for outputs. And for power transformers, yeah, I mean, you can use toroidals for sure. But there is also the thing that, the industry is as it is, that people like to have things. If you go about making something that's new, that's different, that it is usually not well accepted by the guitar player community. That's how it works. Unfortunately, that is the truth. So Jupiter Effects, you use 400 watt high watt transformers. Well, let me tell you something. We're gonna text a little bit later because only today I had some time to prepare the whole thing for the live stream because I was really busy with the course this week. But I wanted to talk to you about that because I was looking at the Titan, and for the people who don't know what we're talking about, so Chris from Jupiter Effects makes the Titan, and the Titan is 250 watts, big balls stoner type of amplifier. And I saw the transformers. They were really big. They're really big transformers. And I absolutely love that, And I want to talk to you about these things because obviously one day for sure I'm going to try the amp. But I can imagine that it is a beast that needs to be tamed. That's how I imagine that amplifier. It's like, fuck that, when you have to play that kind of shit, it's like, my God, you need to be, it's an amplifier for men. That's what I'm trying to say, So it is sort of a problem because it really, really, it really depends when you're designing an amplifier for somebody else. It is a huge deal, because we are all different. Everybody's different. In this chat, we're all different. In the comment section on my channel, we can clearly see that we are very different, But hey, when you make an amplifier for someone, you kind of have to figure out what they like about that amplifier. Not all people like that kind of bold feel. Not all people want to struggle with that. And I'll tell you something. I was mentioning Flux today, and I remember when we had some kind of jam session and I climbed up on stage and I took his guitar on his setup. That was the first time when I was absolutely shocked by the amount of compression, because he is that sort of like Eddie Van Halen-y type of guy, type of player. I never understood that type of sound before. Obviously, I was young and green and drunk. But people taught me here, there's a certain school of people who tell you about headroom. It's all about headroom. You need the headroom in mixes, in this or that. Well, with guitar players, it's not all about headroom. Headroom is great, but what you want is compression. And sometimes some guitar players want more compression than others. Sometimes some of us, people who play big muffs, and fuzzes, and I like these big, bold amplifiers. I love the way how it feels. I love how it receives the pedals. It's a school of sound. But then you have these other guys, who don't like that. And I remember Freyet talking about this. He made his amplifier like very bold because he would make, let's just say, a high watt style amplifier, and then he would add a choke because high watts, at least the DR103, doesn't have a choke. When you add a choke, you're adding an additional layer of unforgivingness, So if you can't play well, don't play that amplifier. And I think that's a big deal for some players. Some players don't want to struggle with that. Some players don't like that feeling. So, like, you know, you have to. I would just say that you would have to pay attention a little bit for whom you are making that amplifier, and because the industry is the way how it is. Hey, come on, you know, we have people making clones and Marshall clones for like 25 fucking years, you know. So I have two 2007 Marshall vintage modern amplifiers. What do you think of those? Um I tried the modern vintage. They're okay, you know. I'm not I'm not that I don't even know what to say. I think I repaired one recently, but I forgot all these models, and it really depends on what year they are. I don't know what to say. I have a 75 Marshall, and for me, whenever I play some of these newer Marshalls, for me personally, I always like my Marshall better. But not everybody has a 75 Marshall, and I tend to agree with the fact that a lot of these newer Marshalls, they sound okay. They sound good. You can make great sounds with them. There's no question about that. The only thing that I question about Marshalls is serviceability. You know, the sound is okay. Even like when you play a lot of these DSLs and stuff like that, there are people who like that stuff. There are people who like the JCM 900. It is stupid to argue about these things, like whether I like something or somebody else likes something. I just like the amplifiers to work, and I just like people not having problems with their amplifiers. That's what I really, really like. Um, so, I mean, you know, you get to a point when you don't care. You know what I mean? It's like I had this producer guy come in, and it's his hand wired walks behind me, and he has to come and pick it up if he watches this live stream. But here's the thing: he is a producer. He's also a guitar player, but you know he doesn't give a fuck about the amplifier. And a lot of the time, you're like, "Hey, man," when I was younger, like, "Hey, you want to see this?" And they're like, "I don't care." You know, I can just make anything sound good. You know what I mean? So you come to that point. It is very nice for us to be there are differences between amplifiers. We can talk about these things. There are different preferences, but realistically, a lot of this gear that you can buy today just works well. And if you know how to turn the knobs right, and if you know how to play right, I don't think that you would sound in any way bad. There is obviously that level of like when you get like high productions and recording, but a lot of people search for, you know, the best possible Marshall, and then they don't have the microphones, the preamplifiers, the converters, the rest of the equipment in the chain to support that kind of, recording which they are aiming for, and they don't have the music, if you know what I mean. So that's just my take on it. I just, I came to the point where I have my amplifiers, which I have. I love them. I love to try different things. And I realize that most of the stuff that I plug into, rarely I'm like, oh God, this doesn't work. Like sometimes it happens, but it's rare today. Most of this equipment actually sounds okay. You know, it is great. But I'm always going to love my amplifiers better than somebody else's amplifiers. I mean, come on, right? It's like mine is the best. So Adam is writing, the thing I love about Frayet amps is how unforgiving they are. It lets you go from cleanish to high gain just by playing differently. I would say that is the high watt school of sound. I do have my Sound City where I did some unique mods to it, and that is an amplifier that I would definitely gonna make some videos on the channel about that amplifier. But yeah, it is weird how that circuit works. It is weird the amount, like the range that you have with that circuit, how you can go from clean sounds to like ridiculously, like weirdly distorted sounds. It has a lot of headroom, right? And it's not only power amplifier headroom, it is also like the way how the preamplifier works. So I would just say that these things are, somebody wouldn't like that. And sometimes an amplifier like that is hard to play. Sometimes when you want to solo, you need a compressor pedal. That's just, you know, my take on it. That would be the compensation for the problem. Not all people like that. A lot of people like to have like a Marshall type of thing. This is different. It feels completely different when you play it. So what kind of amplifier models do I mean for not good players? Well, I think what you're referring to is that what I was talking about, that, some of these unforgiving amplifiers are not really good for players who, I'm not saying who players who can't play. It is just a struggle to play these amplifiers. And if players expect that they are going to get the nice fluidy, like liquidy high gain tones without additional pedals with these amplifiers, is going to be quite hard, because a lot of guys, they like the fully saturated, Jose Mod and Marshall thing, because it feels completely different under the hand. So let's see what we have here. The transformers have a sound, so to what extent do you get that sound back with the profile of the respective amp and its power amp when it's routed to a class D amplifier? Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, because I don't know what to tell you for that, because, if you're talking about profiles such as like the Tonex profiles, stuff like that, it is a different thing. That's the discussion, it's not going to be an amplifier. I just believe that the profiles sound good. If they sound good, they sound, you know what I mean? Like if you can make a good sound out of it, if I can switch my DAW on and just, plug it in and it works and I get a good sound out of it, it's good enough for me. I'm absolutely fine with that. But mostly you're gonna get the frequency response. I did record a lot of these profiles that I have on the Academy. I did record them at high volumes, sometimes at high volumes, sometimes at lower volumes, because you would get that additional compression, and the Tonex picks that up, that additional compression. It's like having a little bit more gain. But then again, it's also a digital model. It doesn't do that exact same thing. It's not the same. And if you use you were referring to like class D amps and stuff like that. I mean, with class D amplifiers, you're gonna get a very good you're gonna get that model just louder. And it works. People play it out, on gigs. And it's easy to carry. And it is great. And yet again, I don't think that there's need to compare that to amplifiers, because it's like a little bit of a different thing. But as I said, like many times, I use both. Leo writing, in your video about what modelers don't do well, I wrote a comment about how that's probably why old school players won't enjoy modelers. Got several replies defending modelers that I never attacked. Yeah, man, don't comment on these things. Like these people that make these comments, I mean, come on, when you run a YouTube channel, like I do, this small, nice YouTube channel, I kind of have to talk, respond, and I really like that you guys are here. I love that a lot of people comment on my videos. It's also great for YouTube, because you're gonna get like more views and more of everything. But man, like there are these virtue signaling people who just jump over there to defend something. I don't care about that, I would really like to talk about transformers and some informative things, and I really hope that people who watch this, you benefit from this video, benefit from something. You know what I mean? Other than me arguing with some people who are essentially, I think Joe from Hello Sailor, when we had our podcast, he said it really well. um, he said that they are trying to justify their purchase. Nobody needs to justify their purchase. I'm fine with whatever amplifier you have, or if you play a modeler, I don't care. The whole thing about people commenting on these things is like, I think it's the exact same thing that's wrong with the entire world today, which is like, hey, let's have a discussion, but most of these people are quite unreasonable, and then they attacked people. It's just, hey, come on, just play whatever the fuck you want. But the problem is insecurity. They are insecure about themselves. They are insecure about whatever they are doing in life, and that is the biggest problem. If I'm going to be plain and direct, which I really like to be on this channel, I don't want this to change. They can't change my opinion. Not because I'm an ignorant asshole, not because I don't want to change my opinion, but I will change my opinion when I spend some time analyzing things, talking to smart people. When somebody tells me, hey, Marco, you're not right about this, and this because of that, and that. I'm all about changing my opinion and growing and learning. And I think that's the only way to go in life. Those people, I mean, come on. I never made a comment on YouTube anywhere unless it is a supportive comment. Arguing about modelers and this and that and explaining to me how that stuff works. I even had one guy from my country explain, but I guess he doesn't know. I saw it in the name. It's like, made 5 comments about something, I was like, I gotta switch these notifications off. Like, I can't read this stuff, I don't want to read this stuff. Like, you have to bring us proof. What is this, a court of justice? Fuck off, man. It's the Slightly Technical YouTube channel where, we talk shit and we discuss some gear. And yeah, I mean, the general idea behind the channel is actually teaching people some stuff, learning some stuff. That's why I have the goddamn course that I'm finishing next week, which is amazing. But yeah, let me just read some of the comments. So we've got a lot of comments. Yeah, let's do some rants, right? Maybe this is a good point in the video. We can do a little bit of ranting. So Adam is writing, the angry commenters also won't read, listen to anything you respectfully respond to with they just want to shout at someone. These people have a problem, come on. We don't really need to waste our time with these people, because it is a weird world, the fact that we are here. Just look at this. It is me, a guy in this crazy place, these fucking Balkans, where we do like magic and stuff like that. And I'm talking about like output transformers for an hour. You guys are listening to me. We are having a hang, and people can actually be completely normal. We can support each other. We can learn from each other. And then you have, like, everybody has internet today. Everybody has a phone. Just look at the people around you. I mean, come on. When I look at people in my city, they have an empty fridge, but they do have the newest phone, and they drive a 100,000 euro car, but they have an empty fridge, and usually an empty head. You know what I mean? So that's the same thing with these people. Everybody has internet and a phone now, and everybody can comment. There's a lot of people, and a lot of people watch these videos. When you think about it, it's a lot of numbers. When could you reach to like 10,000 people, 100,000 people, like 15 years ago when YouTube started? Okay, YouTube started back then. Could you even imagine that you can have a conversation with as many people? Oh, I love that. Please provide proof of Ohm's law, or else you're a fraud, is how they act. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, the only answer, I did respond to one of these comments where one guy actually commented, I don't even remember anymore, but come on, man. It's like something like, all you claim is blah, blah, it is all blah, blah. And it's like, how do you know these things? How do you know what it's like? And I just answered, because I program this stuff for a living because I have a degree in this stuff and because I used to program this stuff. All right. And I'm not just saying this like, listen to me, I'm super smart because I went to school. Fuck that shit. I did that stuff, you know? And I'm not an expert in programming modelers, but I can program some audio DSP. And I do understand the principles because let me tell you something. Let me tell you something very nice, you know? If you think that these companies which sell you these products, if you think that these companies create something new, then you're wrong. And I have to elaborate on this because, yeah, some companies, sometimes they introduce something new. But when it comes to digital signal processing, the knowledge is found and the knowledge is developed on the universities. And if you go to ResearchGate, which is a website that a lot of people don't know who are not from academia, if you go to ResearchGate, you're going to find a lot of documents for modeling these things, you know? And in those documents, you've got a lot of very smart people modeling those exact things. They do like diploma, dissertations, doctorates, and like writing this kind of stuff. And what most companies do is they just implement that in a product. You know what I mean? So that is how the industry works. All right. So I'm not saying that some of the companies don't have some really good engineers that bring something new to the table. That's also possible. I'm just saying just generally how it works. Do you really think that, you know, you've got some developers in China developing, you know, this some special new modeling techniques for the newest modeler that you can buy of Temu? You know, but when it comes to these bigger companies such as like Kemper, XFX, Helix, I don't really know. I don't know these people, but I would know that, you know, these are not multinational corporations. These are companies where people work, a lot of smart people work, and a lot of people in the company are, in these companies are in the marketing team, in the finance team, HR department, people like that. We engineers, we absolutely love these people because we can always talk to them, you know, we can always talk to them in a very scientific and competent way. They don't understand shit what we're talking about. And you would have a few engineers that would do stuff like that. And they would find different ways how they can implement things. But usually they are not the people who develop these concepts, right? The concept of AI, as people call it, this machine learning that everybody is using for the Tonex, for the this neural amp modeler, or the Kemper, that was developed a long time ago. Kemper didn't figure out how to make these amplifiers. They just figured out how to make this transfer function that is going to imagine that you have your guitar sound inputting in the audio interface. And then you have to apply one function, a transfer function, a rather complex function that will make that sound that you input in the audio interface is going to make it sound like a Marshall. Well, you can make that transfer function in various different ways. What modelers do, they actually do the manual, like the manual labor. And there are different ways how you can, so many different ways how you can do that. If you would get into that material, it is beyond crazy, especially modeling like nonlinear functions and like distorted sounds and stuff like that. There are different ways. They can model even the entire circuit, like they model the diode, they model the transistors that use and all of that. But the problem is, if you would want that to be like very extremely precise, because you obviously have LT Spice and stuff that's relatively precise, you know, when it comes to modeling how electronics works, it doesn't work in real time. Okay? So then you have to make compromises and approximations. And when you make compromises and approximations, then it simply doesn't sound like a Marshall, you know, right? It sounds kind of, but not really. And then they figured out that with this neural networks, they can get to that same transfer function, but in a much easier way. So instead of modeling all these things, as I said, different ways how you can model this, like crazy amount of ways how you can model this, they went with like, all right, let us supply a bunch of input material for these algorithms to do their job. And the algorithm is the same, believe it or not. This algorithm, like the neural network, it's pretty much the same for all these things. And it is going to create that transfer function, which was really hard to make by doing it manually. And that's why these profilers are ridiculously great, because now you can do it by yourself. You know, you can just reamp your amplifier and in 15 minutes you get a model of it, which is ridiculous. And some people ask, how are the neural plugins, for example, how different are they from like quad cortex modeling? Not modeling, I'm sorry, I kind of mix up these terms with like profiling. How is that different? Well, it's different. I don't really know. I cannot say for sure that the algorithm is exactly the same, but it's for sure a very similar algorithm. Just for the neural plugins, they're gonna put more like data as the input, and instead of making a profile in 15 minutes, they're gonna profile it for 3 days and let graphics card burn through all that information, because the more information you give to these algorithms that are designed to create these transfer functions based on neural networks, the more information you give to them, the better function it creates. It creates a better function that has less percentage of a mistake, and they're really good with that. But there are some things that these algorithms don't do. There are some things that these algorithms don't model. And that's why I kind of, responded to that particular comment. It's like, you gotta, how do you know that? Well, because I kind of, know something about that. And I don't want to say that in a weird narcissistic way, but that's just a fact. And I just felt like maybe it's not a bad idea that somebody comes over to the YouTubes and says that, because most people, most guitar videos, like guitar related YouTube videos, are kind of weird because it's all about the hype. Mostly it's all about the hype, even though most of these YouTube channels, they're ran by people who try their best to do what they know. Most channels are ran by people who are mostly guitar players. I even stopped playing guitar. For me, playing guitar is a struggle, But these people play guitars well, but they also upgraded themselves so they can record well, edit videos, do like a lot of like interesting hard things, to run a YouTube channel. But the problem is that these companies don't tell them what their products are. It's always some kind of like, we are hiding the information, because it's in a way insulting, like, what are we, stupid? So we don't, we shouldn't know these things. Like, you don't need to bother your simple mind with that. So you can sell me the same thing over and over again. That's my point. It's just, why wouldn't we know about it a little bit? Who wants to know? If there are people who want to know, then they can learn about it, right? But if they don't want to know about it and say like, oh, all this technical stuff is boring and stupid and I don't need to know this, I want to go and play guitar, go for it. Go play guitar, switch this channel off and this video off and go for it. It's like, do whatever the fuck you want, man. So in general, yeah, it's interesting what happens on YouTube. So Dave Berry is asking, will quantum processing improve the algorithm? Well, listen, I'm just going to return your comment. Absolutely. And this is in the realm of like, I can't say, I'm not an expert in quantum computing and stuff like that, but realistically, um, the more processing power you have, the more complicated algorithms you can process in real time. It's as simple as that. So you can get stuff to be more complicated. You can model more, like you can model stuff more in depth. That's why when I made this video about modelers, I kind of said like modelers don't do something yet. For sure, they're going to be able to model stuff, but you would be surprised how far we are still from modeling some of the things that the amplifier does without approximations. So, we're still far away from it. Quantum computing, yeah, but when is the point when I'll have a quantum computer in my room? You know what I mean? How much will the quantum Kemper cost? But um veteran vibes. Get to see more of my workshop. Yeah, it's a little bit of a different camera angle. I think I'm gonna be doing more of these things. And Sep is writing, the more CPU we get, the more inefficient coders seem to become, eating the new CPU up. Oh, let's not get into that topic of coder efficiency. That's ridiculous, Come on. Coders are efficient. No, man. Yeah, it is a good point because coding efficiency can be really, really complicated. Not all coders are built the same. I'm not a very good coder, mainly because I never wanted to do it. But I did it. And when I used to code, I really tried to be like really neat with this stuff. And a lot of times, there are different approaches to coding. Sometimes you would just code something until it works, and then you're gonna wrap it up and like make it nice and neat and optimize it. But a lot of the times, they don't optimize stuff. It really depends who is working on the thing. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, we had. Don't you think that guitar YouTube is fucking boring lately? And all these videos, like, did you see this stuff that recently came out? Because let me tell you something, I didn't see anything. Let's do a little bit of a let's lighten up the situation by saying how boring guitar YouTube is. And this is like rather provocative. But it's quite interesting that there is a lot of bad energy on on YouTube guitar world. It feels like really really weird at this particular point. It's I'm just reading the comments. You know, I watched this video and I don't like to I'm not here to bash on any YouTubers, but I like to speak my mind. I recently saw that video by Fluff, and um I have to look the video up, what it was called. Um I mean, I watched Fluff's. Yeah, look at this. Yeah, it's called "Burnout by Gear." You're not alone. Let me just play that for you, just really, really quickly. I need to put my headphones on.
Are you sick of hearing about the next big thing in the guitar world? You're not alone, and here's why it's not your fault. Our spoils are plenty. There are so many good things in the guitar world. There are so many wonderful tools to help us be the best player that we can be, to sound as good as we possibly can. And most of the time, It can fit in your pocket or a backpack, and that's a great thing. Now, there are several things about being a modern guitar player that is also not very great, and that's modelers, plugins, pedals, guitar models, pickups, literally everything. There's just new.
So I'm gonna end your misery over there. We don't have to watch the entire video, but this is the video that I watched. So what I wanted to say about this is that okay, we've got a YouTuber that made a video about absolutely nothing. He tells us in the video that he goes back to his old guitar and sometimes he chooses a single pedal to use and you know, go use the factory whatever, change the modeler that you're using. People, can you realize how bad this whole thing is? Like it is completely missing the point. You know, the fact that people buy the same gear is already missing the point. That's at least my opinion. It's a hot take, all right? Why would I want to have the same gear as you? Or why would you want to have the same gear as me? That's my philosophy, and it's an open discussion. I'm not judging anybody, but the whole industry made it like, hey, like let's all have this pedal, and let's all have this amplifier, and let's all have this. And how are you original then? How are you? You know, what's so special about you? Because if you take a look at Black Sabbath, for example, there were a lot of things special about them. There is only one Ozzy Osbourne on the planet. There is nobody else like that. If you take a look at, I don't know, like Led Zeppelin, take a look at any artist, like, I don't know, Corrosion of Conformity. There's something about them. They wanted to be a little bit different, you know? It's, why would we want to be the same? And here we are having like this gear burnout. They all say that we live in the golden age for guitar. Fuck that. That's not true. We don't live in the golden age of guitar. This is a disaster. What kind of golden age is this? There's no, like, it's not like, I want to say there is no music. There is some kind of music, but not commercially available, and people are really struggling. This is not the golden age. The fact that we all have Kempers and now you have Kemper 2, and everybody was making video about how the Kemper 2 didn't do anything new. Well, let me tell you something. They didn't do anything new because there was nothing new on ResearchGate. Hot take, but I need to blow my nose yet again. Yeah, we do have a situation here at our YouTube land, and everybody feels like really weird. The companies feel weird, and the YouTubers don't know what to post anymore, and that is mainly because there is no new gear. Who cares about the new pedal? You know, I think that we really came to the point where we don't really care about the new pedal. You know, if you haven't made it like kind of special, at least something about it, they need to look a little bit different. They need to, you know, is there something to the circuit that's original? You know, they're copying stuff, and then, you know, they just, I don't even know what to think about it, because it kind of became boring, and we have divided between like people who, a lot of people who are here, a lot of people who are listening to this. I mean, it's really like crazy how divided we are on the planet, and also when it comes to YouTube and gear and you know, all that stuff. There are people who just are fine with gear and they search for the cool stuff. And I've seen like there are so many of these small companies that make really, really cool stuff, cool gear, and it kind of inspires people to do something else. But like most of the companies, like, come on, like copying these designs, yet another Tube Screamer, yet another Marshall. Is there anything new? I mean, that's sort of the reason why I had the idea behind my academy and what I'm doing. And because in the course that is going to come out next week, we make big muffs. We analyze big muffs. We learn electronics through analyzing. Oh yeah, I'm just going to highlight this comment just very quickly, and I'm going to address that in a second. I'm definitely going to address that in a second. So, and I like to talk about these things, but I want everybody to know that this is not about being negative about the whole thing, because I understand that, some people would feel a little bit offended, and we would also have the virtue signaling modeler army coming up our way. But yeah, the market is definitely changing, and I was talking about my Slightly Technical Academy and the Big Muff Pie Demystified course. What I teach in the course is not for people to build a big muff. Yeah, for sure, you learn a bunch of things in software, in electronics, and how to build a big muff, and how to solder, and how to drill the fucking enclosure. Everything. I really, I worked so hard to make it just like, so it's okay for everybody. People at different levels, and I'm gonna upgrade upon it. It's a work in progress, and this entire year is going to be dedicated in all these courses that are, about building this stuff. But what I do in that course is I try to stimulate people do it differently. It's okay to build a big muff just like the one David Gilmour used. There's information on the internet, you can go and build it. But we learn about these things so you can make it different, and you can also not just buy those components and just assemble it, but you learn how to make it with like different components, learn what to listen to in the sound. I explain some additional new mods which are not found on the internet. I mean, like nothing. I mean, I try to be different, I try to stimulate people to make something different. Therefore, you can go for a big muff. You can make 10 of them, because big muffs, like you could have 20 of them and they're all gonna sound different, So, if you think about it, it is like super, super cool to be different. But if, you want to buy the same pedal that everybody has, you can also do that. It's going to work. It is going to have the frequency response, but you're not going to be different, and you're not going to know anything more in the process. You're just going to argue in the comments, and that's it. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what I think this world that we are in deserves. It deserves a little bit more clarification. It deserves a little bit more knowledge. That's what I think, because the moment we actually demystify these things and clarify these things, then you will know, because you will be able to make your own opinion about, do I like a Big Muff, or do I like a Marshall, or do I like this or that, because you will have a little bit more knowledge about that. And it's not about making it super technical. It's called Slightly Technical because it's supposed to be a little bit. It has to be technical, because come on. I've been watching these YouTube videos for like 10, 15 years. And you know what's the worst thing about them? In my opinion, is that they scare people of the technicalities. And in 2025, I get guitar players in my workshop. And whenever I'm supporting a band, they don't know basics. They don't know how to assemble their pedal board. I get questions. Do I put a delay before or after the distortion? We're on that level. Because for 15 years, nobody was explaining that stuff. I mean, some channels obviously explain, but the majority, the general picture about that whole thing was, it was just mostly succumbing to the whole talk about nothing. Let's talk about why it happens, and I love that there are a lot of people over here that actually like that kind of stuff, and that listen to that kind of stuff, and they also obviously support what I'm doing, and also talk about that stuff here in the comments. So I'm gonna bring this up. Jupiter Effects says 1,200 euros for a video that sells nothing. Hooray! And let's talk about that for a second. Let me just, because there's a possibility that my dog is going to come. So yeah, a lot of YouTubers. There was an industry. I already said there is an industry of YouTubers that charge for the videos that they make, and for sure, doing these things is not easy. It is a full time job, and they kind of have to charge for something. The problem is that nobody gives a shit anymore, and actually, a lot of YouTubers are getting far less views, so it doesn't really sell well anymore, and people are just not interested. And as I said, it's a, it's a lot of money, especially for small pedal builders. And I can imagine that Chris from Jupiter Effects had experiences with this. I guess that people don't want to be like, hey, like, here's a video about how this pedal sounds. Because what are we? I mean, just imagine this. What are we actually getting off this video? Whenever we watch these YouTube videos, what are we getting from these videos? Because I think I mentioned this already, but you see, in the audiophile world, in hi-fi, it is very hard to present speakers. So a new company is selling you speakers that like monitors, whatever, and how are you supposed to hear them? The only way you can hear them is with your own ears. I cannot listen to monitors through my monitors. Obviously, there are different ways of miking this up and blah, blah, blah. They don't do it. They don't do it. They actually open stuff up. They actually talk about serviceability. They talk about, there's obviously people who you believe, who you trust, and they would talk about this equipment, but you never hear it. What we do in the guitar world, and what we have been doing for almost 20 years now, is we have been watching people play with toys, and it feels like it's like, when you go to those porn sites and there's like, the husband watching his wife getting banged by the neighbor or stuff like that. That's kind of the thing. So I'm watching other people play around with toys, and I would like to play with those toys. And then I make a comment on that video. And I tell the guy, you're not playing well with your toy. I can play better. Or I don't like how your toy plays. You know what I mean? It's like, it's weird. Because realistically, it's also weird what we get as a result. Because sometimes you can watch videos, they sound great. Sometimes you can watch videos of the same pedal or amplifier sound like shit. It really depends on how people work, how they do the whole business that they're doing. And at this point, like, everything kind of sounds great. Unless you try the equipment, how are you gonna know if it inspires you? Because I think that's like very important. That's at least my take on it. And they killed pretty much all the small guitar shops, and you can't really, for example, you can't try a Jupiter FX pedal anywhere near where I am. Obviously, maybe we could if there was an industry of shops that we can go do that. It all became like we sit in our room and listen to other people play with their toys instead of having fun, instead of actually being together and playing stuff together, trying stuff out. So, that's at least my weird take on it. Let me just run through some comments. Yeah. Adam is a little bit rough on some people, but yeah, I just think that you shouldn't tell anyone that they can't do something. You know what I mean? That's the worst thing that you can tell somebody. That's the worst thing that you can tell to your children. You can't do anything. Oh, this is too hard for you. That's bullshit, man. Like, come on. Why is it hard? Why is it hard to understand at least a little bit of things? At least a little bit of something, at least a little bit of technical something, because you need to know some technical things. Otherwise, go play a classic guitar. There's no cables. There's no speakers. You go to a gig, you get a sound guy, he puts a microphone in front of you, and you play. Or no microphone. You just play in a very nice room. You know what I mean? So why Why wouldn't you know something about technicalities? Why wouldn't you know that you shouldn't be a moron and treat your you need to know how to collect your cables and not ruin your jack on your amplifier so it fails because you were just aggressive with the whole thing. You should know how it functions. That's at least my take on it. I don't know if you guys agree. Let me just run through the comments. Yeah, we've arrived. Guitar cuck jokes, exactly. If the goal is tone, you have to understand how the signal is processed. Yeah, people don't want to think anymore. They become lazy. Yeah, but people have been weird for a long time. Always you had weird people. Always you had lazy people, and you had people who wanted to know things, who wanted to learn things. I think, yeah, and regarding this, if the goal is tone, you need to understand how the signal is processed. Well, let me tell you something. To an extent, you don't need to be a developer, like digital signal processing programmer. You don't need to be an engineer to know these things, but understanding basic logic behind these things and understanding, I'm just thinking about how to say this so it comes out right. But you need to understand what to listen for. I talk about these things I talked about it before. You need to understand what to listen for. Because what I found out is that most people actually don't trust their ears. 99% of people don't trust their own ears. They wait for somebody else's opinion. And as I have developed in my realm of work, right, area of expertise, let's say it like that, I would get clients. But usually clients come to you like in every other industry when somebody recommends you. But there's this guy, he is really, really good. You have to go to him and blah, blah, blah. All right, that's great. So I get the client, right? I would mod an amplifier, mod a pedal, try something out, whatever. And they stand next to me. And this happens even with like guitar players from like quite big bands, especially here in the region. They stand next to you and they're waiting for your reaction. And I came to the point where I feel like I can say whatever the fuck I want at this point, with some people. Because when somebody recommends you to someone, when somebody tells you, like, hey, this guy's great, blah, 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 and then it's like, whatever I say is, God's word. And that's bullshit. Because the whole point is that the other guy needs to have his own developed opinion. What I see is that in the industry, this is what happens. Like, what are we supposed to now watch some video from a YouTuber telling me how it sounds amazing, and then I'm supposed to buy it? I think we're in a crisis, people. I mean, we are in a crisis, definitely. And this live stream is great because the moment this live stream ends, we're gonna have to go back to that real world of ours, which is pretty crazy nowadays. Yeah, so that's my hot take on this thing. I really think that what people would benefit the most is learning what to listen for. You don't need to be absolutely crazy about it. You don't need to go in depth as, I mean, I live these things. I absolutely live these things. There is no question about that. I've been doing other jobs in my life. You do a lot of things. You do a lot of things for money, like watch other people play with your favorite pedal, but I did other jobs, but this, doing amplifiers, making this stuff, exploring this is my highlight topic of the day. Usually I don't talk with friends about it because I would be a boring friend if I would talk about it. But I just made the perfect outlet, so I'm doing a live on YouTube where I'm talking to you guys about the things that I think about. You know, I'm joking, man, but like I think about these things. I like these things. I like to explore these things. I like to figure out some kind of like I like to figure out some kind of logical connections to explain some things. That doesn't mean that I'm absolutely right about everything, but for me the process is very very interesting because when you talk to some people how they see things, how they hear things, you know, it it goes a long way, I would say. It's really interesting because you can make these connections, and for sure we can make connections about what the power supply does, and we can learn these things. And for other people who are not me, obviously you're not going to waste your entire life learning these things, but you can learn the basics. And I would say that the first step towards being original is learning what to listen for. That's the first step, because then you develop, as a guitar player and as everything. You can, as a musician in general, and learning what to listen for is practice. It's not about insulting anyone. It's not about saying, oh, I can hear everything and you can't hear. Like, that's bullshit. No, 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 no. We're talking about learning what to focus on, because somebody needs to tell you. I remember when I first time worked with the producers, he's like, listen for that, listen for this in the high frequencies. And then when you practice it, when you listen to that thing multiple times, then you sort of start figuring that out. Then you sort of start separating the room, what the room does, what the power supply does, what the power transformer does. You know what I mean? So that comes through experience. But I think that people would largely benefit from such a thing. So Adam says, I agree totally with never telling people you can't do that. I think it's incredibly effective to learn from just experimenting, finding out what works without worrying perfection for the first time. Absolutely agree. People should do that. People should do more of that, more experimenting. The best music and the stuff that we love, that we listen to, is usually the stuff which was done by people who they were constrained. They didn't have a lot of this gear. They just had to figure out how to make whatever they had work. It's I would just say that's like really that's the most important thing. And different people have different ways how of expressing themselves. Some people are totally into music. They just like to practice music. They just like to play. For me, that journey was really weird because I had a period in my life where I was only playing. And then later on, it sort of developed in a different way. And I would say, I don't even know if I'm ever going to play guitar in a band ever again. Maybe, yeah, maybe not. I can play a few notes, but maybe my way of expressing myself is through winding a transformer. You know what I mean? So it's a little bit different, but everybody finds their own way. And what we kind of do on this channel is just offer some additional information and offer some support for people who want to find their own way, which might be a little bit different. On the other hand, it's absolutely fine not knowing anything and practicing only music. But I'm just pretty sure that absolutely everybody who was successful in the music business, eventually they had to learn some of these things. If you think about it seriously, everybody, like, they all knew what they were doing. There are no dummies out there who were successful in music. And then the 2000s came. And then you have most of these people before, I mean, okay, yeah, when the industry took it over, then it's like, yeah, sit there, play guitar, don't, you don't have to know anything. So I think learning this stuff is super important. Seb says guitarists today learn by watching where the fingers go, not listening. Yeah, but that's a big thing, you know. When I started playing guitar, and I started playing guitar late, it was a there was Guitar Rig, is it Guitar Rig, or what's the tablature software? I forgot about it, but I had the tablatures. And I remember learning for the first few songs with the tabs and stuff like that. And at some point, I was like, I need to learn how to hear these things. And I remember figuring out A minor for like approximately 16 hours for the first time. After that, it becomes easier. After 1,000 songs, Guitar Pro, thank you, David. The Guitar Pro is the one. And after, learning 1,000 songs, it's much easier. After you finish up like 2,000 songs, it's even easier. you know? But yeah, people don't do it. All right, we've got some people talking about the output transformer things. Johnny Bananas is writing, digital modeling has made it easier for players to become simpletons. The same as DAWs and virtual synths make it easy to make music today. No creating sound or cutting 24-track tape. Well, yeah, but it also doesn't have to be cutting 24-track tape, It doesn't have to be complicated. We can use the stuff that is available for us because the tools that we have are incredible, but the way how the tools are marketed, they should be used is, I would say, not really good. I would just say that because most people, what they want to do is they want to switch the Kemper on and it sounds great. And that's what they got. It sounds like some kind of produced processor, which I never liked the sound of. But they like to have a preset. You know what's a great business? Making presets, pardon me. It's not something that I do. I don't make any money from my Tonex packs, That's misery just to run this YouTube channel, But people over here, like locally, they create presets for these processors. And they've been doing this for like 15, 20 years since the dawn of the age of processors. And everybody buys that stuff. They want to play in these like local cover bands. You got to buy these packs or these presets from this guy because he knows. The guy knows. Oh my God, you should hear those presets. And you would be surprised about the amount of money that they pay for these presets that are done by people who know less than the people who paid for the preset. It is ridiculous. Where I honestly think that these devices were designed to be experimented with. That they were designed like, all right, let's play around with this thing, right? Let's learn something. Let's have options. So you can have a Marshall and the Fender and then whatever and this pedal and that pedal. No, they plug in a preset and it's like, bam, I want it to sound good because I use a preset. Bullshit, Nobody's stimulated to learn how these things function. I have this ecosystem, small Canadian company, Empress Effects. That delay pedal sounds ridiculous. Do you know why it never became as popular as the Strymon Timeline? I mean, this is not the only reason why. But people were complaining that the pedal is too complicated to use because it doesn't have a display. Read the fucking manual, You read the manual and you learn how to use that pedal. And it's fine. But how the pedal sounds, it's ridiculous. And I had the timeline, I had the time factor, and I prefer this one. I'm not saying that the timeline doesn't sound good, but it's much easier to use. Presets are easy. And everybody's complaining, like, oh, we need to have these presets. Like, no, you got this device where you can have everything. Why don't you learn how to use it? Right? Why don't you learn how to use it? Why don't you invest some time in that? Why don't you maybe go to the Slightly Technical Academy and ask this blonde guy, hey, how do I use this? Why does this happen when I route this signal like this and that kind of stuff? You know, I would say that that would be the right approach. And then you'd be like, all right, I'm going to make some original sounds. No. They like to click. They like to make it easy and fast so it works. Rant mode off. Right, so let me some comments. One of the most empowering thing as a guitar player is figuring out how to play a song correctly by listening very closely when all of those tabs are wrong. Absolutely. Like those tabs are shit, man. Like nothing's right over there. Yeah. DAW hack. Never cut, edit, just delete, play again. Absolutely. Now, I absolutely agree with that. Now, recently I was recording something, and hopefully I'm going to record more in the future. And possibly I'm going to be working with an artist very soon, producing some stuff, which is going to be very fun and interesting for me. It was something that I wanted to do since forever. And, you know, I'm not going to, you know, I can edit. Oh, for sure. I can cut. I can fix. I don't want to do it, you know. Let's just play it well. And if you're doing that, it's like blasphemy, right? I'm an old school, I don't know, mature guy. Jupiter effects. I made Tonex presets with the Titan. They are okay. I can imagine that the Tonex doesn't really translate what that amplifier does. But, yeah, Johnny Bananas is saying that digital modeling sold to touring musicians because freight costs went up and we couldn't afford to backline rental. Absolutely. And that's why I always say, like, this stuff, it's great, and you know, it should be used. So, you know, that just, you know, arguing about it in the comments is ridiculous. And you know, if it's like different, you know what I mean? So, well, David said like 600 pages of manual for the Tonex. Well, yeah, but you don't need to read it like it's a novel, or you know, what you need is to know where to look for the information. If you have a problem, here's where I look. People don't know the manual exists. And by the way, I was talking about the Empress ecosystem. It has, you know, 6 pages. So, you know. Editing drums is the bane of my existence. Not only your existence, but come on. Yeah, read the manual. That is the moral of this live stream. Read the manual. So it was quite interesting. We talked about a lot of things. We kind of started off with some of the power transformery, output transformery talk. There was a lot of interesting things. I need to update you. So some of the things that are important for some of you. First of all, I would like to thank everybody for joining in. Please click the like button and that kind of stuff. I would really appreciate if you would spread the word about this live thing, because it is something that I will be doing now on a regular basis. The next thing that is coming on the channel are podcasts and conversations, sometimes live, sometimes dead. Not dead, just not live. But like non-edited long form content about these things. Lives are kind of weird because I don't really know how many views they get, and this is not about views, this is about reaching more people. I would really love to reach more people, so people know about what I do on this channel. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, yet again, great. But I would just like to reach more people, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of people can benefit from this and that a great community can be made. Now, the next important thing for me is next week, I am finishing up with the Big Muff Pie course. By the way, if you're interested in learning these things that I talk about here, the Big Muff Pie course is the way to go because it's beyond ridiculous how long it is and how detailed it is. If you want to learn how to basically how to design pedals, I provide a lot of really good information over there. It's going to be followed with new courses, and at the moment it's on 50% discount. So I think it's a really great opportunity for people who are interested in that. Go check it out. You can find it on, let me just see, this should work right. So on the Slightly Technical Academy, you can find the Big Muff here. Next week I start uploading the content, and I'm gonna put out module by module as I finish up the editing and some of the details. But I think that is going to be like absolutely killer for people who want to learn how to make pedals, for people who want to learn how to design stuff. I talk about a lot of things over there, so be sure to go and check it out because it's great. And now it's also a great price. It's a lot of content. It's really, really packed. You can really learn audio electronics through this, just through this one circuit. And as a result, you're gonna build like Big Muffs. It's like beyond ridiculous, really good pedal to learn these things. So that's what I'm doing next week. I want to work on new videos. Please also let me know in the comments what are some of the topics that you're interested in. What are some of the things that you would like me to make a video about? Maybe what are the topics for the future live streams, because I will read these comments and I will, as Stubborn wrote about wanting to learn about output transformers and measuring. There you go. He got a like 2 hours and 40 minutes live talk about output transformers, power transformers, and a little bit of ranting. But that's the thing. So David saying, you're the first guy who do this kind of content. Yeah, I don't know if I'm the first, but thank you. I think it's a good thing that we hang out, and I would really love that the word is spread. I would really appreciate any kind of help with that. I'll be doing my best to make as better videos, as I can. So we attract more people. But the channel has been growing great. We're at around about 4.2k viewer subscribers, which is ridiculous. It is great because there is always a constant growth, but I just know that I haven't been putting out as many videos, but that's going to change. This was because of this course. So I wanted to finish up this course, put it out, and now we are starting to do other things. So yeah, go. Yeah, I'm just reading the comments. Thank you all, guys. No, really, thank you for supporting, and thank you for being on the channel. Thank you for being in the live chat. It really means a lot. Also, let me know. You can also write it in the comment afterwards on the video. Let me know what time is okay for you guys, because I try to make this live at some time when people can join in. I don't really know. I might do it on a different day just to try stuff out. But yeah, I think it would be a great idea just to attract more people, because I think many people can benefit from this type of talk. And the more I relax, I'm gonna be saying more shit. I guess it's gonna be a little bit more fun. Sometimes I'm a little bit too serious about some things. So yeah, that's about it. Go check out the course. Go check out the Tonex profiles. That's some good stuff. That really keeps me going. Really, really, really helps a lot, because this is a full-time job now. And Sep is writing, request to visualize distortion, EQ characteristics graphically, white noise measuring stuff. Yeah, that's definitely coming up in the future videos. Guys, thank you very much. I love you all, and I'll be seeing you pretty much in the next video and in the next live. So be there. See you guys.